Hi guys, today we will look at how Malaysian court and Indian court interpret the constitution. So first, Law Koi Chun argued that the parliament had no power to amend the constitution in a way that removed this Article 5 Clause 4, which is the right to be produced before a magistrate within 24 hours. The government responded that the parliament can amend any part of the constitution, including the fundamental liberties, if the proper procedure is followed. The federal court agreed with the government, holding that the constitutional rights can be altered through valid constitutional amendment. So, in Law Koi Chun against the government of Malaysia, the federal court took a literal and text-based approach to interpreting the constitution. The judges read the constitution strictly according to the words. Using this method, the court held that the parliament has a very broad power to amend the constitution, including the fundamental rights, as long as it follows the right procedure under Article 159. So, the court treated the constitution almost like an ordinary statute, applying normal statutory interpretation and giving strong deference to parliament. Although the constitution is the supreme law, the court did not provide it with extra protection or special safeguard. Crucially, the court rejected the idea of any substantive limits on the constitutional amendments. There is no equivalent of India's basic structure doctrine in Malaysia. Overall, the case reflects a judicial philosophy of literalism, parliamentary supremacy, and limited judicial intervention in protecting constitutional amendments. With that, let's move on.
Next, let's take a look at Kesawanda Bharati against the state of Kerala. In this case, Kesawanda Bharati, a religious leader, challenged land reform laws that took away part of his monastery property. He argued these laws violated his fundamental rights under the Indian constitution. In Kesawanda Bharati against the state of Kerala, the Indian Supreme Court adopted a purposive and living constitutionalist approach to interpret. Instead of reading the constitution narrowly or literally, the court focused on its purpose, spirit, and underlying values. The judges emphasized that the constitution is an evolving document meant to guide the nation through changing times and therefore must be interpreted in a dynamic and flexible manner. In Kesawanda Bharati, the Indian Supreme Court introduced the basic structure doctrine, ruling that although the parliament has broad power to amend the constitution, it cannot alter or destroy its essential features. These features include the rule of law, separation of powers, judicial review, federalism, democracy, and fundamental rights. This doctrine creates substantive limits on constitutional amendments. Even if the correct procedure is followed, an amendment can be still struck down if it undermines the constitution's core property. The court justified this approach by viewing the constitution as a living moral and structural document, not just the text to be applied literally. The judges emphasized that the constitution protects enduring values like justice, liberty, and equality, which must be shielded from majoritarian abuse. Though these purposive and principled interpretation, the court positioned itself as the guardian of the constitutional supremacy. Overall, Kesawanda Bharati reflects a judiciary that actively protects the constitution, morality, and ensures that democratic processes cannot be used to dismantle the foundational principle of the constitutional order.
When we compare Law Koi Chun in Malaysia with Kesawanda Bharati in India, we see two completely different judicial philosophy about what a constitution is and what role courts should play in protecting it.
This difference shapes how each country understands constitutional supremacy.
Starting with Malaysia, the federal court in Law Koi Chun adopted a literal and formalistic approach. The judges focused heavily on the text of the constitution, interpreting it strictly according to its wording. This means the constitution is treated almost like any other statute. What is written in black and white is what the court will enforce. and nothing more. Under this philosophy, the court refused to read implied principle or unwritten limits into the constitutional framework. This created a judiciary that is passive and differential, reflecting strong respect for parliamentary supremacy. In Malaysia, the court sees its roles as limited. It interprets the constitution as drafted, ensure procedures are followed, and avoid interfering with parliament's political decisions. As long as parliament complies with Article 159, the amendment is valid. This reflects minimal judicial activism and a belief that elected representatives, not judges, should have the final say on constitutional change.
In contrast, the Indian Supreme Court in Kesavandra Bharati champions a completely different philosophy. Here, the court used a purposive and value-based approach grounded in living constitutionalism. Instead of sticking narrowly to the text, the Indian judges examined the constitution's spirit, objective, and deeper principles. They viewed the constitution as an organic, evolving document designed to protect the nation's democratic values over time. This philosophy empowers the judiciary to take an active, even activist role. The introduction of this basic structure doctrine shows that courts can recognize implied structure limits on Parliament's amending power, even though those limits are not expressly written in the Constitution. Under this view, the judiciary is just not an interpreter on the Constitution, but it's a guardian of the entity, ensuring that no government, even with a 2/3 majority, can destroy the essential features like the rule of law or judiciary review. So the core difference lies in how each court sees its institutional role.
Malaysian courts see themselves as restrained interpreters bound by text and respectful of democratic majorities.
Meanwhile, India courts see themselves as protectors of constitutional morality, empowered to defend the constitution against potential abuses of political power.
These contrasting approaches reveal two visions of constitutional supremacy. One grounded in procedural democracy and the other grounded in substantive constitutional principle.
When we compare constitutional supremacy in Malaysia and in India, we see two different protection models. One relies in procedure and another one relies on judicial limits. These differences affect how strongly each constitution can resist political majorities. In Malaysia, constitutional supremacy is protected procedurally. Under the Article 159, Parliament can amend the constitution if it follows the correct steps. In Loh Koo Chun, the Federal Court confirmed that as long as the procedure is met, the amendment is valid. There are no substantive limits, meaning that Parliament can amend almost anything, including fundamental liberties and judicial structure. This offers democratic flexibility, but it creates risk. India, on the other hand, uses substantive judicial limits to protect constitutional supremacy. In Kesavandra Bharati, the Supreme Court introduced the basic structures doctrine, which prevents Parliament from destroying essential features of the Constitution such as democracy, judicial review, and even federalism. Even if Parliament follows the amendment procedure under the Article 368, the courts can strike down amendments. The courts can strike down amendments that violate the basic structure. A dominant government could weaken human rights or centralize power, as long as it has 2/3 majority. In Malaysia, the constitution is protected in form, but not necessarily in substance.